Good afternoon, all. Thank you for sticking to time. Moving on to the third session of today's program, we have Dr. Mahesh Ghaisa, sir, professor in pharmacology at Pune College of Pharmacy, Pune. He has a total of 26 years of teaching experience and had an overall GATE score of 92.11 percentile. He had a total of 28 international publications, 22 national publications, and one patent. He has been a research guide to 45 students of MPharm and had presented 31 presentations in conferences. He has been an active member of APTI and IPA. He has delivered 6 guest lectures.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, resource person, Dr. Ruma Deshpande, madam. She is associated with Bharati Vidyapeeth Medical College as an associate professor in pediatrics. She has done MBBS, DCH, MD, and DNB, and she is recognized as a UG and PG teacher in Bharati Vidyapeeth University. She is actively involved in teaching programs at undergraduate as well as postgraduate level for medical students at various places. She has been actively participated in training of family practitioners, nursing, and paramedical staff. She has completed her MBBS MD pediatrics from reputed site GS Medical College, Mumbai. She has around 7 publications in various journals like Indian Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism, Indian Journal of Research. She has written quite a few good chapters, including anomalies of growth and pubertal development in adolescents, endocrinology in obstetrics and gynecology, hypopituitarism and disorders of GH-IGF-1 axis. And she was a co-investigator for around 3 clinical trials. She is a member of different societies like Growth Hormone Research Society of India, Indian Society of Pediatric and Adolescent Endocrinology, Indian Academy of Pediatrics, National Academy of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, Indian Medical Association. I invite Dr. Ruma Deshpande, madam, to kindly take over the session.
Yes, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, madam.
So thanks a lot for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me for your quality improvement program. And I would be talking today on the topic of vaccination, how to ensure vaccine effectiveness. So, so should I start my screen sharing, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Is my slide visible to all?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So I would be speaking today on ensuring vaccine effectiveness. And I think the topic is a hot topic these days, is the talk of the town. And especially we all have witnessed the pandemic, and we all are looking forward for the vaccination, right? So there are certain doubts and certain questions in everybody's mind, whether to take or not to take, whether it is effective or not effective. So however, that is not the talk, that is not the topic of discussion today, but just this brings me to the importance of vaccine in our lives. Okay, so with this little introduction, let us move forward. Okay, now what is a vaccine? Okay, so before I would be covering a little bit of the basics of vaccine and vaccination, because that is very important, to ensure that what we do is really effective or not. Okay, so now what is a vaccine? So when we vaccinate somebody, we are giving a vaccine. So what is a vaccine? A vaccine is a suspension of a live, which is usually an attenuated or an inactivated microorganism. That is a bacteria or a virus or a fraction of these bacteria or virus, which are meant to induce immunity. So they are administered to induce immunity and to prevent infectious diseases caused due to these bacteria or viruses, or to prevent the development of the various sequelae of these infections. So vaccine is nothing but a suspension of the organisms which we administer as a vaccine. So how does this, what is the origin of the name vaccine? Where does vaccine derive this name from? So we all know, we may not know, the Latin word for cow is vaxa. A cow is called vaxa in Latin. And cowpox, that is a disease which cows suffer from, is called vaccinia. And the cowpox material or the pustules of cowpox contains the vaccinia virus. So in short, the vaccinia virus causes cowpox in cows. Okay, so we all know in humans, we have heard of smallpox, we know about chickenpox. So these are all skin lesions which contain the, these diseases are actually characterized by skin pustules or skin lesions. Okay, so the word vaccine comes from the word vaccinia. Okay, now it is very interesting to know that how the first vaccine was produced. Okay, so it was a scientist Jenner, who was a very observant person. He observed that it was very well known in the 19th century that cows do suffer from cowpox. So he noticed, he realized, he observed that the maids who milk these cows with cowpox never get never suffer from smallpox. Because in the 19th century, once upon a time, smallpox was very, very rampant. So it was cowpox in cows, smallpox in humans. Okay, so it was his sheer observation where he observed that the maids who milk these cows suffering from cowpox never get smallpox. It was a dreaded disease in those days. So then he researched and he found out that while milking these cows, okay, the material from those lesions, they enter into the body of the person milking the cows, and because of that, they seem to not suffer from smallpox. So he hypothesized that there is something, that whatever is inoculated in the person is protecting them from smallpox. So Jenner decided to call this new procedure of inoculation of cowpox material as vaccination. So he came up with the smallpox vaccine, which contained nothing but the cowpox virus, that is a vaccinia virus, and it was given to humans, and this vaccine protected humans from smallpox. Now, how did it protect it? Is because though the virus are slightly different, it was cross immunity, because of which the vaccinia virus protected against the smallpox virus too. Okay, they have a lot of structural similarity. So this was about how the first vaccine came up by Jenner in the 19th century. Okay, and after that we have seen that we have come up with numerous vaccines till date. Now, vaccination is the process of inoculating a vaccine to induce a protective immunity against that particular disease. And something active is going on in our body. Okay, so the vaccine mounts an immune response in our body, which becomes protective in the long run. So the immunity and the immunological memory that is induced by the vaccine is similar to natural infection, but without the risk of disease. Okay, it has been proved to be the most powerful and cost-effective weapon of modern medicine. It has eradicated diseases and this has been done solely based on vaccination. Okay. Now, to understand how a vaccine works, we have to understand our immune system. So for successful vaccination to occur, we need an effective vaccine and we need an intact human immune system. So if I today have to receive a vaccine, my immune system has to be intact and robust to mount the desired immune response, the desired protective immune response. Okay, which I would discuss slightly later on. So there is terminology vaccination and immunization. Okay, they sound similar, they are pretty similar and interchangeable, but I will let you know further that vaccination is immunization, but all immunizations are not vaccinations. Okay, I'll come to that later. So coming to our immune system, we are born with an innate immunity and an adaptive immunity. So the innate immune system, the moment a foreign germ enters our body, okay, like the doorkeepers, like the security guards, they spring into action. We have the macrophages, we have the skin and the mucous membrane, all they fight the germs right at the entrance. Okay, so that is the innate immunity. And then we have the adaptive immunity. Now the adaptive immunity is a immunity which activates in response to the germs. Okay, so it mounts an adaptive response immunity. So the adaptive immunity can be either cell mediated with the help of the T cells. It's also known as cellular immunity, or it is humoral or antibody mediated immunity, where the B cells or the lymphocytes are responsible for producing the protective antibodies. Okay, so we have, and it is the humoral immune system which is very, very important in vaccination. Only a few vaccines mount a cell-mediated immunity, but majority of the vaccines, they mount a humoral or an antibody-mediated immunity. So in short, the vaccine after entering the body, it stimulates the humoral or the B cells, the lymphocytes, to mount an antibody response, which in the long run will be protective for against diseases. Okay, so just in short, immunization is the process of rendering a person immune or protected. Immunization could be passive or active. Now, it is very important to understand that active immunization is something, active immunization is something with the body, the immune system of the body is going to mount. Okay, so the body has to work actively to mount an immune response. That is called active immunization. So it could be a natural active immunization as a result of clinical or subclinical infections. We know that if we in a lifetime we suffer from chickenpox or measles, it's likely that we will never suffer from it. So a natural active immunization is with the help of a clinical or a subclinical infection. But we do not want, we do not want to go through the clinical or subclinical infections. So we mount an active immunization by artificial means, that is by vaccination. So vaccination is nothing but mimicking a clinical or a subclinical infection, but without having to go through the entire disease. Okay, so this is by vaccination. I hope this is clear. So immunization, passive versus active. Active immunization is by natural infections, and active immunization artificially is by vaccination. So here we are making the body mount an antibody response. Now, as opposed to this, there is something known as passive immunization. So what is passive immunization? Means the body is getting antibodies or protection passively, ready-made protection. Okay, now this could be either again natural or artificial. So natural passive immunization is very important, especially in newborns, because they receive maternal protective antibodies from the mother and also through the breast milk. So passage of maternal immunoglobulins through the placenta and breast milk antibodies are protective for the infant. So this is natural passive immunization. Versus artificial passive immunization is injection of tetanus, rabies, or hepatitis B immunoglobulins. Okay, the child is at risk of infection, you immediately inject protective antibodies, ready-made antibodies, to tide over the crisis at that given moment. Okay, so this is the difference between passive immunization and active immunization. Passive is by the ready-made antibodies, and active is by you are making the immune system mount a permanent antibody response. Okay, so in short, active immunization the immune system of a body is responsible for producing protective immunity. Passive is the protection is transferred ready-made from one person to the other. Active immunization is usually permanent. This is temporary. Okay, I'm sorry. Passive immunization is usually temporary. It wanes over time. So a child does not remain protected for life. The maternal antibodies gradually wane off from his blood by around 6 to 9 months. Okay, active immunization is induced with the help of vaccines. This is the topic of the day, or by clinical or subclinical infections. And passive immunization is by injection of immunoglobulins or transplacental immunoglobulins or colostrum from the breast milk. Active immunization used for prevention. Vaccines are mainly for prevention, and passive immunization is usually for treatment. Okay, a child is suffering from tetanus. You immediately give a TET globe to neutralize the antigen. So rabies immunoglobulin, okay, to immediately neutralize the antigen. So it is used for treatment. So this is the basic difference. Okay, now we come to the vaccine types. Okay, so because we are talking about active immunization today. Okay, so when we have to give a vaccine to a person, a little bit about what are the vaccines. Okay, so the vaccine types could be either viral or bacterial, because we all know that diseases are caused either by viruses or by bacterium. Okay, so the vaccine could be a viral vaccine or a bacterial vaccine. Further, the vaccine could be a live vaccine or a killed or an inactivated vaccine. Now, what is a live vaccine? In the live vaccine, the organisms that we want to inject are live but in an attenuated form. This means that they have retained their immunogenicity but not the pathogenicity. So attenuated word means, okay, they are live but in an attenuated form, capable of, they have immunogenicity but the pathogenicity has been destroyed. So they will not cause a disease, but they will mount an antibody response. Okay, so then versus the killed or an inactivated vaccine. Okay, the inactivated vaccine could be again toxoids, subunit vaccines, or whole cell vaccines. If the whole organism, the virus or the bacteria, is used to produce the vaccine, it is called a whole cell vaccine. Of course, these are first inactivated or killed. Okay, so the chance of producing an infection is almost it's zero. Okay. In a live vaccine, there is a small chance of developing a subclinical infection. Okay, but in killed, there is no chance of even a subclinical infection. So, in the killed vaccines, we can either use toxoids, the subunit of the organisms, or we can use the whole cell or the entire organism, the virus or the bacteria. Okay. Now, amongst these subunits, okay, now each organism has a, some are capsulated, some are uncapsulated. They all have a protein component. Okay, so based on what component of the organism you are using to mount an antibody response, the most immunogenic component of the organism, only those components may be used, those fractions or subunits may be used. So based on that, a vaccine could be either a polysaccharide antigen or it could be a protein antigen. Okay, a polysaccharide antigen could be further an unconjugated polysaccharide, means it is not conjugated to anything, it is not attached to anything, or it could be a conjugated polysaccharide vaccine where it is attached to a carrier protein. Now, what is the importance of this conjugation is polysaccharide vaccines cannot mount an antibody response in a child less than 2 years of age, because the body does not have the cells of the body, the immune cells of the body cannot recognize polysaccharide antigens. So if we want to give these vaccines in children less than 2 years of age, they have to be attached or conjugated to a carrier protein. This carrier protein is recognized by the immune cells of a child even less than 2 years of age to mount an appropriate antibody response. Okay, so in short, vaccines could be viral or bacterial, both could be either live or killed, Okay, they could be a whole cell vaccine, a subunit vaccine, or a toxin or a toxoid. Subunit vaccine could be for the polysaccharide or protein. Okay, so the polysaccharide antigens are usually the capsulated ones, namely H. influenza B, we have pneumococcus, meningococcus, okay, or typhoid. Okay, and the protein antigens, majority of them are protein. The prototype being hepatitis B surface antigen is the surface protein. Even now, currently, the COVID is considering the spike protein. Okay, so these are all protein uh, vaccines, protein antigen vaccines. Okay, so now this is how these are the components of a vaccine antigen. Okay, as you can see here, this is the disease causing organisms. In a vaccine, you can either use just a sorry, you can use just a sub part of it, as you can see here. Okay, or you can use the entire organism where the rest is inactivated. It's only the immunogenic subunit which is used, which is mainly used in the vaccine. Okay, so this is how the vaccine antigen looks like, or whatever may be used in the vaccine. Okay, these are the various components of a vaccine. So a vaccine, of course, has an antigen as I described. It has an adjuvant. It may have preservatives, stabilizers, surfactants, residuals, and of course, many need diluents, okay, to complete the vaccine, to make it in a ready form. Okay. So now, how does a vaccine come into the market? Okay, so we all know, you all know that before a vaccine comes into the market, exactly like how a medicine or a pharmaceutical product comes into the market, it has to go through trials, clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and finally it is approved for Okay, now we come to the some of the practical aspects. I mean, before this, I would like to tell you that when a vaccine is injected in the body, our immune system mounts an antibody response. It takes some time, a few days, it recognizes the vaccine germ, the vaccine antigen as a foreign antigen. The body, the B cells, they mount an antibody response, and there are certain memory cells which remember the antigen. Okay, so maybe 10 to 15 days later, antibodies start, we can detect antibodies in our antibodies start pouring into our body, and maybe the schedule may require one more dose to complete the immune response, the antibody production or the antibody response. So after the completion of the schedule of vaccination, the antibody titers produced in our body are good enough to fight the germ in case it tries to enter the body later on in life. Okay, and the memory cells, okay, if the disease or the organism strikes us later, okay, the memory cells, they remember that this organism had entered my body earlier, this uh, foreign germ has entered my body earlier, so it recognizes it fast, and they come into action, and whatever the antibodies are already produced in our body just fight the germ and destroy the germ, and thus we do not fall sick or we do not get the disease. Okay, so this is how a vaccine works. Now we should need to know something, like we now know we have a vaccine, we can give vaccines to prevent diseases, and how the vaccines are produced and what are the components of vaccines and all these things. Now the next question is, we should know what is the correct age of vaccinating a person. Okay, so now I would like to say there are two main groups. We have the routine childhood immunization schedule. So this schedule is used to, this has been going on since years, to prevent vaccine to control vaccine preventable diseases. We all are aware of the famous 6 vaccine preventable disease, that is diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, measles, okay, polio. Okay, so these are given routinely to children to prevent vaccine preventable diseases. Okay, and day by day newer and newer vaccines are being introduced into the schedule so that the child receives them at a very early age and does not get these diseases in life. So the immunization of the country, the successful immunization of the country, is tells us that our country is really progressing. Okay, so on one hand we have the routine childhood immunization schedule, country specific definitely, and on the other hand we have special circumstances where we need to vaccinate a person. Okay, so the routine childhood immunization schedule, the age should be as per the age specific recommended ages, which I would discuss. And special circumstances also, I will give a list of special circumstances, but the age should be as per the guidelines, and it should be given only if they are licensed for use in our country and at that particular age. Okay, so you have to refer to guidelines. Okay, which are the factors that affect the age of vaccination? As I told you earlier, children are born with passive protection. Okay, their blood has antibodies that have been passed from the mother to them, and also they are breastfeeding, so they also receive some IgA from the breast milk. So maternal antibodies persist in the child's body for say 6 to 9 months, and the most important ones are the measles antibodies, the rubella antibodies. Okay, so it is very important to give the vaccine at the right age. Okay, only after the maternal antibodies have waned off. Okay, that is why measles or rubella, these vaccines are given not less than before 9 months of age, 6 to 9 months of age. Because if we give them before 9 months of age, there is a possibility that the maternal antibodies will neutralize the vaccine antigen and it would be of no use. It would be an ineffective vaccination. Okay, so in certain fact, these are the factors that affect the age of vaccination. The maternal antibodies, you have to keep this in mind. Type of vaccine, as I told you, a polysaccharide vaccine will be ineffective in a child less than 2 years because the body does not recognize them. Okay, or versus a protein antigen. Okay, that would be recognized. So if we have to give a polysaccharide, it has to be conjugated to a carrier protein to give it to a child less than 2 years of age. The classical example is HIB, HIB, Haemophilus influenza B vaccine. Okay, pneumococcal B, the 13 valent or the 10 valent PCV, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine. These are all polysaccharide vaccines which are conjugated to a protein, so they can be given as early as 6 weeks of life. Okay, and then we also have to keep the maximum incidence of the disease, the maximum age of incidence of the disease. So if a disease is not common after 5 years of age, if Hib pneumonia or Hib meningitis is not common after 5 years of age, you should not give it if a child, you find an unimmunized child. So age, the incidence of the disease also determines at which age you should give the vaccine. Okay. Now, some special circumstances other than the routine immunization of children, we do give vaccinations prior to cochlear implant surgeries. Okay, because we are touching the brain and the ear, and these children may be more prone to get meningitis and all. So we always give them the the pneumococcal and the HIV vaccines, which can cause meningitis. Prior to splenectomy, again we immunize with all capsulated organisms, that is pneumococcal, meningococcal, HIV, typhoid. After immunosuppressive or immunoglobulin therapy, it is very important to know whether the child has suffered from any immunosuppressive disease, for example, like measles. You should not immediately vaccinate a child after measles, especially with a live vaccine, because there is no immunity. The child is immunosuppressed. So in case after measles, after a bad bout of measles, if you vaccinate him with a live vaccine, there is a chance that the child may get the disease. Okay, because he's so immunosuppressed. His immunity won't mount an antibody response, but on the other hand, the child has a small risk of developing the disease due to the vaccine. So it is very important to get the history, whether the child is on any immunosuppressive therapy, has any immunodeficiency, or is on immunoglobulin therapy. Okay, so these are very important conditions. If a child has a chronic cardiac pulmonary condition, in such cases, we do give, respiratory vaccines to prevent them from suffering from any respiratory infections. Pregnancy is a special circumstance where we give, nowadays we give, in addition to TT, now TT has been replaced by DT, diphtheria and tetanus. Okay, so that is one vaccine which we give, and of course nowadays flu vaccines are also recommended in pregnancy. Okay, travel is another special circumstance where if you are traveling to endemic countries, we have to take vaccination of that particular country. For example, if you are going for crowded pilgrimages for Hajj and all, then we have to take cholera and other such vaccines. Travel, education abroad, certain universities require certain vaccinations which they have to complete. Then endemic countries, like if you're going to say Africa, then you have to take certain vaccines of diseases which are endemic there. Okay, then another special circumstances is in outbreaks. Yes, rabies, high risk groups, and lastly the pandemic. We have seen how the pandemic has affected us. So it is a special circumstances where we have come out with a vaccine to control the pandemic. Okay, so these are special circumstances where vaccines have a very important role. Okay. Now coming to the routes of administration, to know that the vaccine is effective, we have to know which are the routes of administration, and each vaccine has a definite route of administration which we should know. Okay, so the intradermal route of administration, BCG, injectable polio, rabies, nowadays, okay, as per the government schedule, they are to be given intradermal. Measles, MMR, rubella, chickenpox. Okay, these viral vaccines are given subcutaneous, intramuscular. Majority of the rest of the vaccines are given intramuscular. Oral is oral polio vaccine, rotavirus. Nasal is the H1N1 flu. You all must have remembered taking a nasal vaccine during the previous pandemic. Okay. Now, which are the normal sites of taking injectable vaccines? We have to keep in mind that in children, we should avoid the buttocks. Okay, deltoid is generally avoided in children because they hardly have any muscle and fat over there. Okay, so we may tend to give it on the buttocks, but the buttocks is a very dangerous area to give injections in children because the sciatic nerve runs very close to the they do not have enough of muscle at that time, and the sciatic nerve is in close proximity to the surface, so it has a great potential of getting damage and permanent paralysis. So we should avoid buttocks in children less than 5 years of age. So the anterolateral aspect of the thigh is the most preferred site in for injections in children. The deltoid is given in older ones. Buttocks is used for vaccination in the older age group. Okay. Now the number of doses. Okay. So when we have to vaccinate, we should know the schedule. What is the schedule? Like, is it a single dose schedule? Is it a multiple dose schedule? Does it need a booster along with the primary dose? Okay. Or is it a seasonal or an annual schedule? Okay. So some of them are single dose schedules. Okay. So most of the live vaccines, they are a single dose schedule because live vaccines are known to mount a very good response and a permanent response. Okay, multiple dose schedules. A classic example of multiple dose schedules is DPT vaccine. DPT needs 3 primary doses, like 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks. Okay, so it needs 3 primary doses because it is a combination vaccine. It is diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus. So to mount a good enough immune response for all these 3 diseases, multiple primary doses are required. Okay, so what is a primary dose? The primary dose are the initial doses which mounts a primary immune response. I said the beta cells, they mount protective antibodies. Okay, so these are the primary doses. So some require 1 primary dose, some require 2 primary doses, some require 3 primary doses. So DPT requires 3 primary doses. Okay, the pentavalent containing vaccines are all 3 primary doses, and then they need boosters at say 1.5 years, 5 years, as depending on which vaccine we are giving. Some are just single dose, especially the viral live vaccines are single dose, but just to ensure complete effectiveness, we prefer to give it 2 doses. Okay, just in case the first was not picked up. Okay, we give a second 2 dose. And then we have the concept of a booster dose. So booster doses are needed in some because the primary immune response may wane after some time. So just to boost up the antibody response, we give a booster dose. Okay, so we all know that booster doses are given in DPTs or in pentavalents. Then we give also hepatitis B, we give a booster dose. Okay, so booster dose is to just boost or to remind the body by injecting another little vaccine antigen, and the memory cells go into action, and they remember, and they again mount a good robust second immune response. Okay, and the second immune response is known to be more protective. Okay, so we should know whether it's a single dose schedule, multiple dose schedule, primary or booster dose, or it is a seasonal annual schedule. So the flu vaccines are generally seasonal or annual. You have to take every year, you have to take an annual vaccine, because these the vaccine causing flu during that season, the viruses may keep changing. Okay, viruses, they keep changing every year. So depending on the virus which is predominant that year, so you have to take a yearly or an annual seasonal flu vaccine. Okay, now then what is next? What is very important is the correct technique of administration. For this, a very good training is essential. The person who's going to inject the vaccine, sorry, the nursing staff, okay, they need to be thoroughly trained as to the correct technique of administration, how an intramuscular should be given, how a subcute, how an intradermal, okay, how even oral to be given. Okay, so because if everything is in place but the administration is incorrect, then again we are losing the effectiveness of a vaccine. Okay, so if the proper technique is not correct, and if they do not inject the entire vaccine, or or instead of the subcute, if it has gone intramuscular or whatever it is, the effectiveness of a vaccine decreases. So it is very important to teach or train the correct technique of administration of vaccines. And lastly, the most important thing is the potency of vaccines. If we do everything, we are knowledgeable about vaccines, we know the schedule, we know the route, we know the technique and everything, we are perfect in all respects, but if the vaccines are not potent, again it is of no use. Okay, so potency of a vaccine means it has to be within the date of expiry, and it has to be always kept in a cold chain. That is, the temperature has to be maintained throughout, from the point of manufacture to the point of administration. Okay, so through that long route, the temperature of the necessary temperature of the vaccine has to be maintained, because vaccines are known to be very heat sensitive. Okay, and when we are giving it for a very big cause, okay, administrating an impotent vaccine will just defeat the purpose. So this is a very, very, very important thing to be kept in mind, and it may also be relevant to you all, to maintaining the cold chain. Okay, and also the VVM monitor. Something about the VVM monitor nowadays. Each vaccine, not all vaccines, but majority of vaccines are coming up with vaccine vial monitors. So on each vial of the vaccine, they have a monitor which has it's a label, okay, and which has a color indicator. So if the color has changed, I will come to that later, it tells us that this vaccine is not potent, because it has not been maintained in the cold chain. So heat destroys the vaccine. So if the color has changed, this means that a proper cold chain has not been maintained, and that this vaccine has been exposed to heat, and the color of the monitor has changed. So we need to discard these vaccines. Okay, now coming to the just to recap about the topic for today: how do we ensure vaccine efficacy? Okay, so we know what is a vaccine, we know the various types of vaccines, we know the schedules and all everything, but there are some absolute must knows about vaccination. we should know the contraindications first, the absolute contraindications and relative contraindications. So there are certain absolute contraindications. As I said, if a child is on immunosuppressive therapy, it's an absolute contraindication to give a live vaccine for at least a few months. Okay, and if the child has reacted badly to the previous vaccine and the second dose is due, then that also becomes an absolute contraindication. Okay, so it's very important to know about the contraindications, the known adverse effects, okay, local as well as systemic, that was already discussed. So at least we can tell the parents that these are expected, these are the known adverse effects, and how can you handle them. Okay, we should know absolutely, it's a must to know what route of administration, technique of administration, and also the factors I told you earlier, the age. You should not give a vaccine in a unindicated age. Okay, sometimes it may cause more of a harm. Okay, so it has to be at the correct age, in the correct dose, correct technique, and it has to be maintained in the cold chain. Okay, now we have to we are all clinicians and health related to healthcare, and so we all have to be really convinced first of all that vaccine is it's a very very important part of good health. Okay, so then only we can be will really work hard to ensure that the vaccine is efficacious. Okay, so my next few slides are about how important vaccination is. So as I told you, Jenner was the first one to come up with the smallpox vaccination in the 19th century, and there the concept of vaccination started. Okay, so developed countries like Europe and America, they started it was in so after that the World Health Organization, UNICEF and all went global, and with the goal of increasing vaccination rates among children in developing countries. However, it was in 1978 where WHO launched the expanded program of immunization. They wanted to expand the program of immunization to all the continents and the countries. Okay, and in 1990 the government of India launched the universal immunization program where they targeted children and pregnant women, and by that time lots of information about transport and cold chain maintenance was highlighted. Okay, so this was a very old national vaccination schedule. You know that it was at birth only BCG, DPT, OPV. There was no hepatitis B, no HIV, no pneumococcal, no rota. So it's all so easy, no? The old one. This is the old one, okay? So gradually vaccines started pouring in. There were success stories. WHO, we all know, declared that smallpox is eradicated, polio is eradicated, DPT vaccine reduced deaths to a large extent, mortality due to measles decreased, and success stories were very evident. Okay, and in our vaccination schedule, Indian schedule also, there has been a lot of progress. As I said, Hep B got introduced, HIB got introduced, IPV got introduced, MR, rubella got introduced, TT was replaced by DT, rotavirus got introduced, pneumococcal vaccine is the last entrant. So we are really doing very well. Okay, the two milestones achieved was polio free. India is now polio free, and India has now also eliminated maternal and neonatal tetanus. Okay, so it's such a great thing that has happened actually. Now I showed you the early thing. It was the vaccines were so less, and now you can see, there are many added. The red ones are all the recent entrants into the national immunization schedule, which the government provides to all children free of cost. Okay. In addition, there are some other vaccines which the government cannot provide, but they are recommended by the Indian Academy of Pediatrics, like the MMR vaccine, because it has the component mumps in it. Okay, chickenpox, hepatitis A, typhoid, influenza, human papilloma virus, okay, the cervical cancer vaccine, rabies, meningococcal, and the Tdap, okay, the acellular pertussis, tetanus, and diphtheria. So the list is long. Okay, so again, I'll like to highlight that to ensure vaccine efficacy, We have to be aware of many things. Okay, and just last 5 minutes on the cold chain. Okay, is a system of transporting, storing, and distributing vaccine in a potent state at recommended temperature from the point of manufacture to the patient. Okay, it is the lifeline of a vaccine. Okay, if we do everything but we don't maintain the cold chain, it's futile. Okay, so three major elements in the cold chain are: you need personnel, okay, you need good equipment, and you need good procedures. They have to be in place. Okay, so right from the level of the manufacturer, maybe we have a vaccine manufactured in a country not our own. Okay, so suppose we are importing a vaccine from the United States of America, on the way in transit through, while air travel, it again needs to be in a cold chain. Then at the national airport, from the airport to whatever the main metros, then wherever it is further sub distributed, it needs to be maintained at all levels. So it's a till it reaches the patient, till it reaches the nurse midwife, okay, for administration. So even the most expensive and sophisticated equipment will not ensure an effective cold chain, not correctly used and managed by the health personnel. So it's a very, very important topic. Okay, so what are the equipment required for cold chain? Okay, this is a set chain and a mobile chain. Okay, the set chains are walk-in freezers, cold rooms, deep freezers, ice-lined refrigerators, purpose-built refrigerators, and domestic refrigerators. Okay, and when we have to transfer the vaccine from one place to the other, we have isothermic boxes, ice boxes, vaccine carriers, refrigerated vehicle. These are all the equipment required for cold chain. Okay, and we should not compromise here at all. Okay, so this is the vaccine vial monitor. You can see here, this is the vial and this is a label, right? This is present on all the vaccines. So it has an central square and an outer circle. You see here, the central square is lighter than the outer circle. Stage 1, it is good, you can utilize. When the inner square becomes slightly darker, but still it is lighter than the outer circle, still usable. Okay. Stage 3 is bad. The inner square is as dark as the outer circle. Don't utilize. And this is the worst. Okay. So probably the vial must have been lying outside the refrigerator. Okay. So the inner square has become darker than the outer circle. You have to throw it away. Okay. So this is a vaccine vial monitor. Very important. And this is the domestic storage where we all, store the vaccines at our level. This is not at a bulk level, but this is at the at the local level. So we have a freezer. We have to be careful. Okay, we do not keep vaccines in the freezer. Okay, the top shelf we keep the live vaccines, BCG and measles. Okay, the middle compartment, the T containing vaccines, DPT, DT, TT, typhoid, these should never be frozen. Okay, so likewise, they should not be heated, they should not be frozen. Both can be very bad. Okay, so the middle compartment, hepatitis A, B, varicella, and all the T containing vaccines, and the lower compartment we keep diluents. Nothing in the door, nothing in the door. Okay, and inside we have a dial thermometer to maintain the temperature of to monitor the temperature of a refrigerator, because if the refrigerator is not maintaining the normal temperature, what's the point? Okay, so we have to have a daily log and a daily check morning and evening whether the refrigerator temperature is normal or in between 2 to 8 degrees or not. Okay, so these are our vaccine carriers. So whenever we have to go for a session, they are carried in proper ice vaccine carriers, which are lined from all four sides by these ice packs. Okay, so that is all about maintaining the cold chain and the potency. So I think with all this, if we really follow all these things, the basics, the techniques, and the schedules and cold chain, definitely a vaccine has to be effective. Okay, so with this I end my talk for the day. Okay, so I can address any questions if you all have.
Participants having any questions can unmute themselves or write the questions in the chat box.
Ma'am, I have one question, ma'am.
Yes, yes, please.
For girls nowadays, cervical cancer vaccines are even the giving. So, what
Yes.
is the right age to give cervical cancer vaccination?
It is actually as per the schedule, as per the Indian Academy of Pediatrics, it's mentioned after the age of 10 years. Okay, after the age of 10 years. So, if at any time a child comes to you after 10, okay, we may start counseling them about the vaccine. It's not hard and fast that they have to take it at 10 and they cannot take it later on. But we start counseling about the need of the vaccine. So after 10 years, it can be given anytime. But there are a few different school of thoughts that some say that you can wait till 14, 15 and you can give it at that time. But the Indian Academy of Pediatrics recommends it after 10 years of age. If the child is between 10 to 14, she needs only 2 doses, 6 months apart. But if the child has crossed 14 years, then she needs 3 doses, 0, 1, and 6 months. So, or any time counseling. So we can just give them all the information and they can come to us and take the vaccine anytime after 10 years.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, madam, for such an informative session. You covered right from the basics origin of vaccines. I got a small question. In case of certain diseases, like
Right.
nowadays, in case of body, like maturity onset diabetes in youth,
Okay.
there is suppression of cell-mediated immunity as well.
Okay.
Yes. Diabetes patients as well. So have there been any such studies whereby there has been any observation with regards to the effectiveness of vaccination in such category of patients? Is it going to affect?
Yeah. See, when there is diabetes in young, okay.
Yeah.
For that matter, even in type 1 diabetes, because we get to see so many type 1 diabetes and it's an autoimmune in origin. And you said that they are known to have a reduced cell mediated immunity, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there are only a few vaccines which work through cell mediated immunity. Okay, so I am not aware of any work done on this, whether vaccines it may affect the effectiveness of a vaccine. So I don't think so. But on the other hand, when we have type 1 diabetes, young type 1 diabetes, in fact, we recommend them to take not only the national immunization schedule vaccines or the compulsory vaccine, but in fact we even advise them to take the optional vaccines. Okay, because it's a chronic illness, they are more prone for infections. So in fact we tell them to complete the entire schedule of vaccines. But regarding your direct question, whether diabetes in the young does affect the vaccine efficacy.
Yeah.
I am not aware of such studies at least, but I'll go through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a possibility that such things can happen? Because usually in diabetics, the wound healing, if you say the elderly as well,
Yes.
is delayed. So that's probably due to hyperglycemia as well as inhibition of cell-mediated immunity.
Right.
So that in a way, if there is some alteration in the immune status of the patient,
Right.
whether such vaccination we need to alter anyhow.
Right. Yeah, but only one thing is, by the time they are MODI, you said maturity.
Yeah, that's mature onset diabetes,
they
like
are
the type 2 picture in young.
Yeah. So they are actually done with a majority of the vaccines by that time.
Right.
So I was just wondering which vaccines could they be a candidate for?
Right. Nowadays, the H1N1 and
Right,
such
right,
vaccination which is
right,
being done in the elderly as well.
right.
So that's it.
So,
Sorry.
correct. So even for in the current context of COVID vaccination also,
Right.
in fact, they first were considering giving all the diabetics and the comorbidities the vaccine, and I think still present. But I think let's see whether, and definitely it's worth uh, looking up at.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's see if we can do something in this regard. If we can have such a niche kind of patients area which
Right.
could be evaluated.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I'll
Thank
just
you.
check whether there are any other questions. There are a few questions in the chat. I can check.
Right.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes.
Vaccines are linked to long-term health problems like multiple sclerosis, diabetes, autism, etc. Could you explain why exactly this happens?
See, it was once upon a time thought that vaccinations could lead to autism, could lead to, these were just speculations. Okay. What did you further mention? You said they could lead to multiple sclerosis. Okay. So, and autism, like autism is a very well known association which was later on, disproved. Okay. But, these are just speculation. I would just say that vaccinations can cause some adverse effects. Okay, the adverse effects that most of us worry are, something like Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay, multiple sclerosis. I could be an autoimmune thing, but Guillain-Barré GBS is a very it's a known side effect. Okay, so why they cause it is only because they may be altering the immune system, so they may get prone for some autoimmune conditions. Then that is the only reason I think why these, Guillain-Barré and I have not heard of multiple sclerosis, but GBS is a known known adverse or a side effect of vaccination. But uh, and uh, and the other one, what did you say? Apart from multiple sclerosis?
Diabetes, ma'am.
Diabetes. No. We really, these are probably just assumptions, but there is no scientific basis to that it has led to diabetes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Deshpande, madam, for a
Yes.
very
Thank you.
informative talk. Right from the basics, you had explained the various important aspects about vaccination, the schedules, the factors which affect vaccines. It is going to be really a thought-provoking. It is a thought-provoking session. So I really thank you and looking forward for your continuous coordination. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I request all the delegates to join after 10 minutes for another session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ruma ma'am, for accepting our invitation. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you.
Okay.